After the cops left with Matt, Lancaster, the Sal's, and I were left standing behind, so full of Freud. What the hell just happened? Lancaster asked, mostly to himself. I didn't bother to answer. Instead, I walked over to the back door, and oddly enough, it was made of wood. With one fell swoop, I kicked the door open. I didn't care to see Lancaster and Sal's reactions. I had to find this black robe Matt has told me so much about. The kitchen was fairly clean. Some pots and pans were stacked on top of each other in the sink. Across the room was the door that led into the actual restaurant, but to my left was the manager's office. I jogged over and attempted to open it, but of course, it was locked. With Matt gone, I had no key, and shooting the locks off is only something that works in the movies. I was about to quit, but then I saw a fire extinguisher behind a small wall of glass near the oven. I walked over, knelt down, and elbowed the glass as hard as I could. It broke on a first try, shards falling everywhere. Danworth was definitely going to notice this, but after what just happened to Matt, I was done playing it safe. Lancaster walked in, probably reacting to the glass breaking. "What the hell's going on?" he asked. I ignored his question and walked over to the door before smashing the fire extinguisher onto the lock. It took a few tries, but it worked. I heard Lancaster walk up behind me. "Is this Gary Danworth's office?" I nodded. "Yeah." I pushed the door open and the two of us stepped inside. It looked fairly stereotypical once I turned the light on. A desk, ceiling light, computer, a giant portrait of Louis the Great. I didn't care for any of that stuff. I turned to my left and saw a closet. I walked over and attempted to open it, but this was locked too, with a KV Sterling lock. "If you're locking your closet, that means you're definitely hiding something," Lancaster said. I held up the fire extinguisher and bashed it onto the lock. Once again, it took a few hits before finally giving in and falling to the ground. I placed the fire extinguisher onto the desk before finally opening the closet. Holy shit. Matt was right. The first thing Lancaster and I saw was a black robe with a white symbol on the right side of it, where your heart would be. The symbol was a pentagram with a V on the bottom, the top edges connecting to the pentagram. Opposite and on top was an upside-down V, the bottom, or still top edges, connected to the top of the symbol. There were also 3 dots in the very middle of the Satan sign. It was some weird off-brand version of a pentagram. Nonetheless, this was very weird. "What the hell?" Lancaster finally said, snapping me out of my trance. "What?" I asked. He didn't say anything, just pointed upwards in the closet. I looked up and saw that there was a shelf up on the top of the closet. On it was something sharp and peering over the edge. I reached up top and began feeling around next to the sharp object. Sure enough, I felt the cold grip of a dagger. I grabbed the weapon and pulled it off the shelf and towards us. It looked like every other dagger, but the disturbing part was the dried blood all over it. Lancaster was frightened by this, naturally. There was no doubt in our minds that this was Dave Brownstein's blood. It was Danworth who killed him, son of a bitch. I quickly put the dagger into my trench coat and walked behind the desk, opening all the drawers. Lancaster also began looking around, behind the painting, under the carpet. When I opened the bottom right drawer, there was nothing inside of it but a Ziploc bag with a key inside of it. I picked it up and opened the bag, taking the key out. It was unusually large for a key, but that wasn't important. What was important was the address written on it in black. 4110 First Avenue, BL. BL? The hell does BL... I looked up in realization of where we had to go next. "Nick, can I take the van somewhere?" I haven't been to Brooklyn in months, still as crappy as I remembered. Lancaster sat in the passenger seat next to me while the Sal sat behind us near the computers. I'd never been in the van before this, and I was a little disappointed to see it was pretty much exactly the same as a news van, but what was I really expecting? I pulled in front of the Jumping Jack Power Plant, a place that has been abandoned for a while now. Like my local coffee shop, I have no idea who nicknamed the place, but something I do know are all of these scary rumors that haunt the place. "Oh hey, I've been here before. Yeah, we did an episode on this place last year." "How'd it go?" "Well, besides a stray raccoon trying to steal our lunch, there was nothing of note, so we never aired it." I shut off the car and stepped outside, Lancaster and the Sal's doing the same. The cameraman began getting ready to film, and at this point, I didn't really care. Now that Danworth was trying to frame Matt, we needed all the evidence against him we could get. I quickly pulled out a cigarette and lit it, taking a drag. What a fucking day. After we were all ready, Lancaster stood in the front of the building, talking to the cameras about what they missed and what was about to happen. I scoffed when he said this part. Also with us today is a private information gatherer who agreed to help us with the investigation. I took another drag. Finally, after what seemed like hours of narration, Lancaster and his men began walking to the building, me closely behind them and off-screen. It was dark and dirty, as you would probably expect. I don't know exactly how to describe the place. Just look up Jumping Jack Power Plant on Google and you'll know what I mean when I say this place was freaky, especially at night. I saw something dangling a few inches above me. When I got closer, I realized it was a spider. I moved to the right of it and continued. God, this place is a shithole, I thought to myself. In the middle of the large warehouse was a staircase leading to an even darker second level. I looked up and saw the conspiracy crew continuing forward. I'll just tell them what's down here later, I thought. I walked down to the stairs, creaking with each step. I couldn't even hear Lancaster in the cells anymore. When I made it down, I saw a single window that wasn't much help since it was night. There were pipes all along the walls and ceiling. I didn't bring a flashlight with me, so I took out my phone and used that flashlight. I started looking around the walls for a door or even just a keyhole. It was even dirtier down here than on the main level. There were dust and old cigarettes on the ground. Part of the staircase railing was barely hanging on, and I'm pretty sure there was a dead raccoon in the corner. Look, point is, nobody would ever choose to be in this dump on purpose, which made it the perfect place to hide some sort of secret room. And what'd you guess? I was right. Near the wall, farthest from the staircase, there was a small keyhole, barely visible due to the loads of other holes surrounding it, but I saw it. I walked closer and put the key inside of it, turning the key and creating the usual unlocking sound, and then nothing. The key fit, so why wasn't it working? I slightly pushed the wall just to see, and sure enough, starting from the keyhole, a good 2 feet of the wall went inwards, revealing a large staircase heading downwards to a dark room. Jesus Christ, this is insane. I ran back up the stairs and onto the main level. Lancaster, get your ass down here, I called out. After a few seconds, Lancaster and the cells came jogging over to me. What is it? He asked. There's a secret room down there, I said while holding up the key to show them that's what it was for. When we made it back down there, I heard one of the cells mutter, "Holy shit." Lancaster began talking to the cameras about this recent discovery. Are you ready? I asked Lancaster a minute later after he finished his monologue about, if you find something like this anywhere, call the police immediately. I mean, he was right. We probably should have called the police, but then that would have alerted Danworth that we were here. Lancaster nodded before the four of us walked down the large, clean stairs. There was a wooden double door with runic black symbols all over it. What the hell? Lancaster muttered. There was a black keyhole in the middle of it. I tried using the one from earlier, but it didn't work. Shit. I'm gonna have to go old school. Stand back, I told the others before ramming into the door, causing it to break open. Thank God it was made of wood, not metal or something. Actually, scratch what I said about thanking God, because this room had nothing to do with him. I don't really know how to describe it other than unholy. It was a pure red room, red walls, floor, and ceiling. There were giant statue hands in each corner of the room holding large torches, the only light in the room. Besides that, there was nothing else. Oh, and also the large wooden table with blood all over it. In the exact middle of the room sat a large wooden table about 6 feet wide. It looked permanently stuck onto the floor. On each corner of the table were large poles, handcuffs attached to all of them. The most disturbing part were the huge, disgusting bloodstains practically painting the whole thing. Was that Dave Brownstein's blood? Darker question. Was all of that Dave Brownstein's blood? What the fuck? Lancaster said. Seriously, Sal responded. Yeah, the other Sal responded. I've been working this job for a long time now, and I've seen some legitimately horrifying and weird things. I've seen a man get his brains blown out right in front of me. I've seen my best friend betray me only to get kicked off a building by a psychotic police officer. I've seen an 18-year-old janitor scream at a homeless man. But this really took the cake. I walked over to the table while the cells began filling the entire room, Lancaster going on about something I can't remember. I quickly started searching for anything else, a piece of ripped clothing, any fresh blood, something. I already had enough evidence to tie Danworth to this place. I literally found the key in his office. I just needed evidence to tie Dave Brownstein to this place. We spent another 10 minutes in that horrifying room searching for anything related to Brownstein, but unfortunately we found nothing. I was pissed, but Lancaster comforted me by telling me once the police started questioning Danworth, the FBI will of course find out and want to come in and take all the credit for a huge cult conspiracy, meaning more eyes and more trained professionals looking into this and finding evidence. Also, the dried blood on the table is definitely something that'll lead back to Brownstein, hopefully. Still, this was all enough to get Gary Danworth on the radar of the NYPD. After that, we didn't even bother trying to cover our tracks. We have video evidence of all of it, and even then, Danworth can't exactly go to the police about all of this. Lancaster dropped me off at my office. There was no time for sleeping. I needed to figure out everything on Gary Danworth, starting from the moment he was born. However, when I went to unlock the front door, I saw it was busted in and slightly ajar. I put my key away and pulled out my piece, a Browning high power. I tried my best to be quiet as I pushed open the door. That wasn't very quiet. I could automatically see someone had done some serious damage to my office. My desk was flipped over, papers everywhere. The computer was destroyed, the keyboard missing most of its keys. My walls were covered in, well, what I hoped was red spray paint. My reclining chair was slashed, the arms of it were hacked off by a crowbar or something. Hell, even my trash bin was dented. Once I got over to my desk, I heard something behind me. A floor creak. Somebody was still in here. After a few seconds of nothing but grasshopper chirps and distant dog barks, I spun around with my gun aimed at whoever was there, only for something metal to hit my arm. My gun flew out of my hand. I know that was amateur of me to let go, but that was completely unexpected. I moved back, reaching near my ankle to grab my Beretta Nano. The person who hit me ran over, forcing me to stand up and dodge the swing of a dirty crowbar. The person was wearing all black gloves and even that stupid robber mask that criminals wear in comic books. He swung at me again, me dodging it again. I reached over and held his right arm down, meaning the crowbar was useless for the time being. With my free hand, I punched him in the face, still holding onto his arm. He responded by attempting to gut punch me, but I moved to the left, gut punching him instead. I figured he would try to punch me again, but I was wrong. Instead, he kicked my leg, causing me to fall on that knee. He managed to free his arm, slashing me across the face with the crowbar. I fell to the ground before whoever this was proceeded to beat the shit out of me. He mainly kicked, but also hit my torso and legs with the crowbar every once in a while. I never got the chance to grab my ankle piece. Eventually, after a minute, the person quickly took something out of his pocket and threw it on top of me before running around me and out the door. I quickly stood up to give chase, but once I got up, all of my bones basically gave up, forcing me to fall back down and lean up against my desk. What the hell was that? What's the point of this? I saw the thing that the robber or someone threw at me. It was a piece of paper folded up. I grabbed and unfolded it. There was nothing on it besides one sentence. Keep your fucking mouth shut. Written in blood. That was the same thing Dave's brother was told, word for word. This was the same person who threatened him. Said to be the person who killed Dave. Now, I 100% knew Danworth was connected. Less than an hour after I discovered his secret murder room, I'm ambushed and given this letter. An even bigger question, how do they figure out where my office was? And also, what else do they know about me? "4 weeks ago, my office was trashed, and I was attacked by one of Gary Danworth's lackeys. I knew it couldn't have been Danworth himself who attacked me. The person was too skinny and too tall. My running theory was one of his waiters, Brady. Of course, he had an alibi, a bullshit one. Seeing a movie. Yeah, I bet you fucking were. Ever since my office was trashed, I've been working at Nick Lancaster's studio, along with him and some of his researchers. I feel like I owe him an apology after I told him about the attack. Lancaster and his researchers took this whole thing very seriously and professionally. We, of course, went to the police and told them about the attack on me. We didn't tell them about the secret room, since the only reason we found it is because we broke into a restaurant and stole the key from Danworth's office. Detectives Walter Armstrong and Lars Archer were the ones on the case, but ultimately they couldn't find the guy claiming shortage of evidence or whatever. So I said screw them and wanted to go find this asshole myself. I still was a private investigator after all. However, Lancaster expressed that wasn't really a good idea and I should probably just lay low. She said that if they found my office, that means they were following me, and if they saw me trying to look into this, it would just result into another beatdown. I reluctantly agreed. Lancaster and I have been visiting Matt practically every day, telling him everything. We also all pitched in some money to afford a high-ranking attorney, Deborah Astills. She insists on us calling her Debbie. We told Debbie everything, including the secret room. She told us that was a stupid move and that we can get arrested for that. She also looked into my office break-in and told us that the case was barely looked into and that the detectives did a piss-poor excuse of an investigation. Lazy assholes. Debbie also informed us that the evidence against Matt was very bad. DNA, murder evidence planted at his apartment, a goddamn witness testimony. Of course, Gary Danworth gave a statement that he saw the two of them arguing about something and it got to the point where they had to take it outside. This completely contradicts his earlier statement he gave to me 4 weeks earlier, but of course the police bought his shit. I didn't understand how easy this all was. How easy was it for Danworth to frame Matt like it was nothing, or like he's done it before? I mean, what do we have? Lancaster and I never met Matt until after Brownstein was killed, so we couldn't really vouch for him. Matt's alibi during the murder is horrible. He was in his apartment watching television. It's the truth, he told me the day before the court trial. I believe you, but there's no evidence for that. That night, I combed over everything from the day. There had to be something, at least one piece of inexcusable evidence that could prove Matt was at home. I stayed up practically all night. This wasn't about putting away Danworth anymore. This was about proving Matt's innocence now. The next morning, I woke up and realized I fell asleep in the studio. As if on cue, Lancaster walked in, 2 coffees in his hands. Here, he said, handing me one when he got close enough. Thanks, I responded, Lancaster sitting across from me. You ready for today? He asked, taking a sip of his drink. At first, I didn't know how to answer. Today was the big day, Matt's court trial. The two of us, the research team and Debbie, have been hard at work for almost a month, trying time and again to rebuttal all of this fake evidence being brought Matt's way. Well, I'm about as ready as anyone can be for this, I responded. Yeah, I hear you, man. Oh, I just want to let you know that you'll definitely be seeing during the broadcasting. We can't exactly cut you out without cutting out the rest of the courtroom. Sorry. It's fine. I don't really care about this point. If you're confused, Lancaster was given permission to film the court trial under a few conditions. The biggest one being that the entire trial must be put in the episodes, so the court system can be portrayed as accurate as possible. To be honest, I was kind of glad that this would be on television. Even if we didn't win, we still had a lot of Lancaster's footage to show people, which would hopefully lead to more people investigating Danworth and helping us. Eventually, the Sal's showed up and we were ready to leave. The trial started at 8:30 in the morning. Even worse, we had to get there earlier so the cameras and mics could be set up. Lancaster drove the van there, me and the passenger, while the Sal's were in the back. We got there at practically the same time as Debbie. When the 3 of them were inside setting up, Debbie and I reviewed one last time. Matt was going to plead not guilty, Debbie was going to try to trip up the apparent witness, and if all else fails, we could appeal to the judge that this is Matt's first offense. We didn't really even have any counter evidence. And who has evidence of hanging out alone in your apartment? All the stuff against Matt was extremely convincing. Hell, I would probably believe he was guilty if I was in the dark about all of this. But then finally, after weeks of waiting, the court trial was starting. The Sal's were near the left of the large room, Lancaster standing by. Debbie quickly walked up to the front and sat next to Matt, who was wearing a stereotypical orange jumpsuit. I sat at the edge of the already full second row on the right side. I looked around and saw a couple of familiar faces. On the left side was Gary Danworth, wearing a suit and smiling. Bastard. Next to him was Brady, the waiter who I suspected broke into my office and attacked me. I also saw Dave Brownstein's brother, Charles, and his wife, Mary. Charles had grown a full-blown beard since I last saw him. I was a little surprised to see the two here at first, but then I remembered Charles's brother was the victim here. Of course he would show up. In the very front, a few feet away from Debbie and Matt, sat Trevor White, the state prosecutor going against Matt. I know I haven't mentioned him before, but during the 4 weeks of preparation for the trial, his name came up a lot in our research. He was wearing a dark blue jacket and dress pants, black dress shirt, and a red tie with yellow stripes. He was sitting, writing down something in his court notes. There were a lot of other people here too. If I had to guess, the others would be Dave Brownstein's family, Matt's family, some of Danworth's employees. Long story short, the room was filled, many talking to one another. I simply waited, checking my watch. "The court will come to order," yelled the voice. The talking quieted down as I turned and saw it was the bailiff, who called out as expected. "Please rise for the Honorable Judge Glenn Down." All of us stood as Judge Down walked up and sat in his throne of power. The power that would decide whether Matt would be sentenced or not. "Please sit," Down told us, all of us obeying. He began taking papers out of his file. "How are you today, son?" Down asked Matt. "Uh-oh, my lawyer said I don't have to answer that question." A good half of the people around me chuckled, probably Matt's family members. "Amusing," Down simply said. It's anyone's guess what Judge Down was going to say next, because unfortunately, we're never going to know. Right then, Trevor White, the state prosecutor, stood up with a pistol in his hand. He immediately shot and killed the court officer nearby him. People started screaming, getting on the ground, jumping up to run away. I looked behind me and saw Brady run towards the main entrance, a gun out as well. He fired it into the air. I turned to the other two exits and saw that two other men standing in front of them, also with guns. I wasn't allowed to bring either of my pieces with me inside of here. No one can. Shit. Another gunshot went off. I turned and saw the lifeless body of Judge Down fall out of his chair. It was White who shot him. I quickly stood up the same time as Danworth did. I stopped as a few other people stood up as well. "You four kill the rest of the court officers. Secure a perimeter around this place," Danworth ordered. Brady moved out of the way as the four men, who I later learned were more of Danworth's employees, ran out of the courtroom. Eventually, more gunshots and screams came from out there. Danworth then looked to me and winked before pulling a gun of his own out of his jacket pocket. "All right, everybody, listen to me. I want all of you to sit back down now." Nobody refused, the people standing sitting back down. Danworth chuckled. "Good. That means you too, Jonathan." Everybody turned to me, as well as Danworth's gun. I realized I was still standing. I put my hands up and said, Okay. I sat back down. Charles was down holding a crying Mary in his arms. Lancaster and the Sal's were lying on the ground, hands on their heads. "Hey, you two chuckle fucks, stand the hell back up and continue filming this." All of us looked over to see the Sal's slowly stand back up and point the cameras towards Danworth, the latter laughing for a few seconds. What the hell is he doing? He walked towards the front of the room where Judge Down was just sitting. He took a little bit to just look out to all of this. "Well, here we are. 4 weeks of planning for this very moment. All because of you, Jonathan." He looked and pointed his gun at me. I did feel a little good that my investigation scared him so much that he felt he needed to do some big stunt like this. Still, only a little bit. "Oh, and I guess you too," he said again, this time to Matt, who was crouched down behind his chair. However, Danworth's acknowledgement caused Matt to stand up fully. "And why's that?" he asked. Danworth started walking slowly towards Matt, gun now pointed at him. "I thought I would get away with it, like the others. I thought it was going to be the same as the others. But it wasn't. I was a fool for ever thinking you would just believe the story. You two were good friends. I should have been more careful. I should have killed you too." One of the women in the gallery whimpered, and I couldn't blame her. This was disturbing, but I still had questions. Why did he want all this filmed? He literally just admitted to killing Brownstein and possibly more. The hell was his angle here? So, you hired these two schmucks to try and look into what happened, which I'm thankful you did. Danworth then turned away from Matt before walking closer to me, but also facing Lancaster from time to time during his stupid monologue. "Well, you morons were out all day finding evidence against me. My men were placing evidence against Mr. Monroe here. Fake security footage, a knife with Dave's blood all over it, a witness. Technically not that." What? There was no witness? Actually, that might make a little bit of sense. It's like Danworth read my mind when he turned to face me and asked, "What's wrong, Jonathan?" "You're confused, aren't you?" I stood up. A risky move, I know. Damn right I'm confused. "Well then, ask your question. Any question." I took a breath before asking. "Well, I know why there wasn't any witness. Because there never was going to be a trial. This was your plan from the get-go. Shoot up the courthouse and raise some hell? Danworth smiled. What I don't know is why go public with all of this. Your evidence on Matt is damning enough for him to be framed and put away. You could have easily killed me and Lancaster if you had to. You would have gotten away with it because you clearly have men inside the NYPD helping you out. So why this big performance? Why ruin the rest of your shitty life? Lancaster laughed wickedly, evilly. Because, Jonathan, none of us are getting out of this alive. Certainly not me. Certainly not Matt. Certainly not you. We are all leaving this mortal realm to a newer, better life. Just then, Danworth turned to the camera. Brothers and sisters, you know who you are. It is time for us to rise and go to the other side. It's what we've been training for decades. But first, Danworth quickly spun around, pointing the gun at Trevor White. I almost forgot about him for a second. At that moment, I also realized that Danworth not only has NYPD officers in his hand, but also lawyers, the state prosecutor. White looked nervous. What the hell are you doing, Gary? You had one job, Trevor. Kill Jonathan Campbell. You couldn't even do that. I know, but wasn't trashing his place and beating the shit out of him enough? Oh, shit. It was White that broke into my office and attacked me. No, it wasn't enough. Nothing can ever be enough when it comes to you. White shuddered. He wasn't made for this. He couldn't kill me, and he clearly couldn't take Danworth yelling at him. Danworth decided before holding the gun to White's head and pulling the trigger. Blood went all over White's desk as his body fell to the ground, knocking his chair over as well. Christ, that's 4 dead now. What is this psychopath doing? Some of the people around me screamed, Matt crouching down a little. I'm sorry for that, everyone. It's just that Trevor was a loose end, and I hate loose ends. Speaking of loose ends, Danworth pointed the gun back at me. Wait! I yelled. Danworth smiled. Let me ask you something. I'm listening. How did you know Matt called me? When I went to see you the next day, you clearly already knew I was onto you. How did you know? A few seconds of silence went by before Danworth laughed. No, sorry, cackled. Oh yeah, I guess you would want to know. He glanced at the cameras before looking back to me. Matt, he turned to Matt. You are horrible at sneaking into my office. My door was slightly ajar, but mainly the kitchen security footage of you picking the lock and going inside was enough. After that, I had you followed everywhere by good old Brady over there. He followed you to Washington Square Park all those weeks ago, and not only heard, but recorded your entire conversation with Mr. Campbell. He chuckled. Also, $10,000 stolen from my desk was a big giveaway. Wait, the money Matt was paying me was stolen from Danworth? Jesus Christ. Danworth turned back to me. Well, any more questions, Jonathan? You weren't even supposed to be here. That moron Trevor just done his job and killed you in your office. Yeah. I do have another question. He didn't really seem to care that I just interrupted him. Yes. Why? What's the point in doing all of this? Killing people. He cackled again for like the 10th time before looking over to someone behind me and jerking his head towards me. Next thing I knew, Brady stormed up to me and pointed a gun at my head before shoving me out of the gallery and closer to Danworth and the judge's chair. Danworth walked even more closely to me before clocking my head, sending me falling to the ground. Ah, shit! I yelled to no one. I looked up, holding a bloody gash on the left side of my forehead. Danworth leaned down to try and intimidate me. I'm doing this because of Zubox. Everything we have done is because and for Zubox. What the fuck? What the hell is Zubox? I half asked, half screamed. Zubox is a being greater than God. A being that promises his followers eternal paradise as long as they follow and act on his commands. This really was a fucking cult. So, I started standing back up. This Zubox, he's the reason for all the sacrifices. He's the reason you killed Dave Brownstein. The reason we're here right now. Danworth smiled. That's right. My entire life has led up to this one moment. Men, it is time. I only had a few seconds to ponder what that meant before the gunshots began. Bang. I spun around and saw the guy guarding the main entrance had shot himself in the head, his lifeless body falling to the ground. Bang. Then another goon. Bang. Another. I faced Brady, who was still behind me, and saw him change the aim of his gun from my head to his. No! I quickly reached over and grabbed his arm, pulling it away from his mouth. He struggled, but it wasn't enough. I managed to take the gun and smack him in the face with it, causing him to fall to the ground unconscious. I spun back around and aimed my weapon at Danworth, who was still in turn aiming his at me. Drop the gun, I said. No, I'm good, he responded. Let me ask you a question, Jonathan. Why won't you let me die? I've killed dozens of innocent civilians. I've just confessed to that on camera. Nobody would give a shit when I die, so why are you trying to ruin everything I have worked for? He sounded genuinely angered about me not letting him take the easy way out. Because you're a psychopathic cult leader that needs to see justice for your crimes. Well, don't give me that horse shit. I am going to Zoobox, and there's nothing you or anyone can do about it. He walked closer to me. But first, I'm going to kill you. One final sacrifice. That's when I realized, since all the guards were dead, Matt was able to get down, sneak behind Danworth. Everyone heard the gun load. Put the gun down, Matt said, aiming one of the dead guard's guns at his old boss's head. Before Danworth could respond, I shot him in the left shoulder. The psychopath screamed in agony as he dropped his gun before holding his wound. I reached over and grabbing his head, smashed it onto the table Matt was previously sitting at. It took 4 hits to the head, but then Danworth was out cold. I let go of his body, it falling to the floor. Matt put his arm down. It was over. It was actually fucking over. Holy shit. The police managed to come inside a few minutes later. While everything with Danworth was going inside the courtroom, the 4 thugs outside were holding hostages outside the building to distract the cops. Luckily, when all the cultists inside started shooting themselves, the police took the opportunity to kill the rest of Danworth's men and safely rescue the hostages. That's when they came inside our courtroom. Since Danworth confessed to Brownstein's murder and trying to frame Matt, the latter was released and cleared on all charges. With Danworth alive, he was convicted of the murders of Dave Brownstein, Trevor White, and also dozens of other murders. If you remember, detectives Walter Armstrong and Lars Archer were the ones in the case of my office break-in, but they said they couldn't find anything. Well, it turns out those two were working with Danworth the whole time, which explains their piss-poor excuse for an investigation of my break-in. But that's not the interesting thing. No, the interesting thing is that these two were also the detectives assigned to the Dave Brownstein murder, which is why it was ruled a suicide so quickly. If you're wondering how we know all of this, it's because the FBI got involved as soon as they heard about everything, the court ambush, Danworth, you name it. So naturally, they looked into every case Armstrong and Archer had in the past, and turns out for the last 15 years, almost every death on their hands had their head cut off, but was ruled a suicide. This frightened me a lot. NYPD officers, the state prosecutor, who else was working with Danworth? Some mildly good news is that there is no bigger boss. Danworth is the head honcho of the cult. He confessed to that numerous times. Some more good news is that Danworth was convicted for every murder. Finally, the family of the poor, innocent victims can live knowing the truth. Also, it was just announced that Gary Danworth was put on death row and will be executed. Thank God. Since the entire court incident was filmed by the Sal's, it was put into the Lancaster episode, which became the most watched episode of the show. Millions and millions of people watching live. It became the biggest case of the year and gained loads of media attention since something like this has never really happened before. Matt and I became extremely famous, Lancaster pretty much becoming an official celebrity since it was his show. I even caught some creep taking photos of me while ordering lunch one time. Also, now that hundreds of millions of people know who I am, I started receiving dozens of clients a day. I managed to get a nicer office and a nicer, bigger apartment, practically a penthouse, thanks to the $10,000 extra dollars Matt gave me. So far, it's been months since everything that happened. I've still been in contact with Matt and Lancaster, and we've been hanging out too, to the point where I'm starting to consider them friends, actually. Life was not back to normal. Life was better than normal. Until last night. Lancaster, Matt, the Sal's, and I were at the studio. We were discussing a conspiracy Lancaster was going to make an episode about soon when the first shot went off. I pulled out my piece and told everyone to run. Another shot. It was one of the guys from Lancaster's research team. His body fell to the ground. That's when I realized this wasn't some pistol. The shooter was wielding an assault rifle. I had to get down. I hid behind a catering table. Shots went off everywhere. Screaming started and ended abruptly. Finally, the shots stopped. I stood up, gun aimed and ready to shoot, until I saw him. The shooter turned to face me and he smiled before winking and running off the way he came. Somebody called the police as I heard sirens coming, but I didn't care. How the fuck did he just come in here? How did he just shoot up the studio? The man that just shot up Lancaster's studio was Trevor White, alive and back.